Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A with Miss Litany Burns. We're so excited today. This is going to be a great Q&A session. And we're going to be talking about her two books and her work, The Sixth Sense of Children, which everyone has seen on the flyer, and Develop Your Psychic Abilities. We have both of these. If you haven't gotten a copy, they're both on Amazon. Definitely get them. They're a resource that you will want to have because there's a lot of good information in it, and we're going to talk to her about it today. But Litany is an internationally renowned clairvoyant medium, author, lecturer, and screenwriter. She has regularly appeared on national television, radio, film, magazines, newspapers, videos, and on the internet. And you can find Ms. Burns' work on YouTube, the Psychic Matrix Medium at Large series. And that's coming soon on her humorous website blog, My Psychic Life. She's a proven pioneer in her field. And I just showed you her two books, this Sixth Sense of Children and Develop Your Psychic Abilities. It's sold over 400,000 copies. And they've been both published in the US and internationally. And we're so happy to have Litany here with us today. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to our group.
I'm happy to be here, happy to help.
Nice. Well, we just love your information, your books, because this group is all about supporting parents with highly intuitive children, and not just the children, but the families, because there are parents that have this ability and don't really fully know how to embrace it for themselves, and then how to help their children. And that's what both of your books, Develop Your Psychic Abilities and The Sixth Sense of Children, kind of give that whole package together to families.
Yeah, I think that it was born, actually, both books were born from classes that I taught. I hadn't planned on writing them as books, but I did the books because I wanted them to get out to more people than sitting in a class with me before COVID, way before COVID. And so the first classes I taught were kids, and they were private classes because in those days, nobody wanted to even mention the word psychic or intuitive. And so I guess these parents were brave. But anyway, the kids were great. They were ages 7 to 14. Most of them didn't know each other. And I had what you would call 3 and 9 or 10-year-old ADD boys. So, and I just taught it in my place. And it was interesting because as I learned later, teaching the adults, even adults who knew and who had taken classes, the kids were like, oh, you mean those colors we see around people? Things like that. Or I know when this is happening. And they sat for a 2-hour lecture from me. And then we would do experiential things like as I put in the book. And I decided, since I didn't know anybody else doing them, whether it was important. And so I made a questionnaire myself and gave it to the parents, and after a month they noticed no change. So I decided I'd send it maybe in 6 months or 3 months, I don't remember now. And it was interesting because then all of them individually said their kids were doing better in school. They said that they were communicating better with their siblings, and they had a greater sense of the world around them, not because of me, but because they were using their abilities.
Yeah, that is so important. I love that you shared that, because that's part of our goal with what we're doing with our group and sharing their information on the website, is because we feel that of kids needing to work with their abilities. They can't use it in their everyday life, and usually not in schools. And so they need to have a means of processing that energy and using it. And so that's why I love the exercises that you have in your books.
Well, I find that a lot of these kids, I mean, they should be using it in schools. Unfortunately, our culture is very intellectually focused. So we have all these classes, and so many of these kids who are our future leaders. I don't know if people know, I put in my book that Albert Einstein couldn't talk till he was 4, and then he couldn't read until he was 9. And he got a D in math. I mean, so a lot of the tests and the way we view and test our children are great. We need to develop their mental prowess. But all kids are born with intuition. We all have intuition. And so we're not using this as a learning tool. Teachers, good therapists, good dentists use intuition. But the bottom line is that it's not really looked upon as something positive or strong. And so what happens is, the sensitive kid, and by the way, sensitivity is a great strength and not a weakness, but the sensitive kid that pulls back, that hides, or comes forward and becomes everything for everybody. Street kids who live by their intuition fall through the cracks. And these kids are in learning disability classes. And I was telling Ellen that I just recently read that children in the US now, from ages 0 to about 6, 1 million of these children are on medication. So they're being drugged, and then they grow into adults who are trying to, have pushed all this down. And not to say we should all sit around and be like, new age, but these are important learning tools that kids can relate to. And these are the kids that are our future leaders. I mean, I had a kid, he was in the World Trade Center on 9/11, and it was in the morning, and he and his father were in Windows of the World. And he was 19, and he just felt uncomfortable. He felt so anxious that they didn't even finish their breakfast. He wanted to leave, and they went down in the elevator, got out on the street, and like 5 or 10 minutes later, the first plane hit. He didn't go, oh, there's a plane coming, but he trusted, and his father at least, was nurturing of him. I mean, we don't want to over nurture these children either. They're people. We're all psychic children. And so they're people. We don't have to make them do magic tricks. We don't have to make them do very special things, but we also don't want to have them push down what they know in a society where that's not valued. Not just intuitive talents, but knowing. I mean, I read for adults and children all over the world. And it's amazing that people just don't trust that. They trust what they think or what others think. We even use it in our vocabulary. So what do you think? What do you think I should do? I don't know. What do I think I am? Or whatever, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That's not all of us. We have this whole other part of us that can add to our mental knowing or our mental thinking. That isn't even acknowledged. But it's something we all use. And then we feel really excited about it, and then we get scared. It's just what happens in our culture.
Yeah. Well, Litany, I think it would be great too to share a little bit about a background on how did you come to know your abilities and embrace them? And then, like you said, you started teaching classes to kids. How did you progress to the point of then start working with children?
Well, I didn't, like when you're in school and you're a little kid and people go, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And people go, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a doctor or a teacher. I didn't raise my hand and say I want to be a psychic because I didn't know what that was. And I didn't know what that was for a very long time. I was one of those kids that had abilities and didn't know anything about it. My family all had abilities. Nobody knew anything about it. My father would, unfortunately, as I grew up, tell me all the things about prospective boyfriends that were not good. My mother would dream about her dead relatives. My brother had an imaginary friend. My sister saw auras, and we took her to an eye doctor because we thought something was wrong with her. I was, I kept my sensitive or private part and did whatever anybody wanted. But I wrote my poetry. I even had a Ouija board, which I had no idea what it was, but it's a mediumistic tool. But the bottom line is that we didn't know anything about this stuff. And I even asked my mother later on, and I said, well, what was I like as a kid? And she said, oh, you scared me. I was like, what? She said, oh, my friend was going to come over and you told me she's going to bring cookies. And she goes, you were just a little kid. And it was interesting because even after I became professional, kind of backing into it, not going, I'm going to become a professional medium. A lot of high school friends told me that my teachers would say, oh, I knew she was clairvoyant, or I was like, why didn't anybody tell me? I had no clue. I just used my abilities because they were part of me. And that's what most people do. It's, people go, oh yes, I grew up in a family. My mother was a psychic, my grandmother was a psychic, or read cards or whatever. That's great. But the bottom line is we don't inherit our psychic abilities or our intuitive talents. They're already with us. Some kids are more intuitively inclined. Some kids are more athletically inclined. Some kids are more musically inclined, but they're all intuitive. And so I say that's great. And this is my opinion and my experience, but I say that's great because then you can nurture your children if you're in touch with your intuition. You can revere that or help them to really use their abilities in daily life. That's the big thing. I mean, you could sit there and say, I just talked to dead Uncle Charlie, but the bottom line is, well, how is that helping Charlie or you in your life? But the bottom line here is that for me, I had no clue. And as I progressed and eventually met people in that profession, and kind of understood that, oh, I thought this was normal, it's got a name. And so then I progressed and kind of also fell into teaching because a friend of mine went to an adult ed, she wanted to teach an adult ed class, and she wanted to talk on the Ouija board to see what she would do because she was a gardener. And so it came out Gardner, and I went with her, and the woman who was in charge was named Mrs. Gardner. And my friend never taught the class, and I taught a class to people who just went, oh, I don't know what this is. I was going to take photography, but this is the next thing that was there. So these people had no clue. And they loved the class, and that's how the book was born, because I knew that everybody had these abilities and could develop them more.
Wow. And I love that, because you're absolutely right. I agree. All children, everybody has intuitive abilities, and some just have a little heightened degree of it more than others. And it's just how you work with it. So you didn't have formal training. This just all just naturally develops for you.
Yeah, I just, I guess I'm kind of iconoclastic, but I didn't go to a teacher or study it or be tested with it or anything. It became what I learned, what I know, I pass on to people. And being a writer, I wrote a book about it. And even when I wrote the book, I just put it out there, and the publisher said, we like it, but it's half a book. And I was like, oh, I'm not writing it. And someone said, I think you should write the rest of the book. And so I did. And that book has its own life. It just keeps selling. It keeps selling and selling and selling. So and actually I did a video, which is now dated, but to try and get it out there, and did the children's book, because that's really a big thing. This is the future. And you can see how we're kind of, nature's always trying for balance, and we need to also. And I think a big deal is more and more people like you and other people are aware now.
I absolutely agree, Litany, because your book, like you said, they came back out in the 90s. And back then it wasn't the attention. Now you have so many kids coming in, like you said, between 0 and 6 being on medication. There's so much, I think people are starting to recognize, this intuition, this high trait of high intuition, intuitive abilities, as being something that we've got to start paying attention to. These younger kids are coming in much more connected and aware, even I'd say than other generations, but it's like you said, it's always been here, and people's awareness is raising, like we need ways to help them. And that's the big key. And that's what your books with these exercises do. We have some questions coming in, so I hope you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all.
Have the questions come in. So actually, Kim, I'm going to let you unmute, and you can ask Miss Burns your questions. You sent a couple of them in.
Yeah, I did. My first question, because I heard you say that you had 3 boys and they were diagnosed with ADD. And I'm curious, do you know if things like ADD and or what societally we recognize as anxiety often is a component that students with or kids with these abilities face or have?
Yeah, I would say certainly there are children that have biologically or chemically have an an imbalance and need possibly medication. But even the person that coined the term ADD is now saying, well, not everybody, all the kids have it. But yeah, a lot of, if you put an intuitive child, a sensitive child in a classroom with 30 different kids, some of these kids are just going to react. They're not going to be able to sit still. I always tell people, if you have a kid and they're kind of antsy and edgy or whatever, let them play. That's a great, just give them another 10 minutes to play, because that's the way kids get rid of energy. I had a client that came to me, and she had a little boy around that age, and and he was a great kid, but he, you know, he had what we would call ADD, ADHD. And she just felt awful because every time they went, she came from a big family. Every time they had like a holiday dinner, this kid would act out, and everybody would be reprimanding him, getting mad at him, and he'd be crying. And I said, put the kids at a table in another room, let them have their dinner there, and have the adults in another room and have dinner. And he was fine. Because these kids, you put them in with all the energy, and if nobody shows them how they can let go of tension. I mean, I had a teacher who was very intuitive, and she had this kid that she loved, but he was so disruptive in the classroom. She put him at a desk right by her, and he was fine because he wasn't picking up everybody's energy.
Mhm.
Okay, and then another question I have is, what are some of the things that you teach children to aid them in handling and or honing these abilities?
Wow, that's a long question for me, but
It is.
well, first of all, there are 8 different types of abilities. So some kids are going to be more talented in some and some others. And I think and like Ellen said, there's a lot of exercises that they can do, you know, and a lot of kids' games are intuitive. Pin the tail on the donkey, hide and seek. They use their clairvoyance. They use, and when you're a kid, don't you have that kind of hidden communication with your siblings? That's telepathy. And so what I try to do is have them experience, you know, through these exercises, whatever they choose. It's not like you must do this exercise. Let them choose and improvise, because kids are great with that. But the main thing I want them to do is trust their gut, trust that part of them, because their gut is not just a gut, it's where their body and souls talk to them. And so, and it's by feel. And so this helps build their self-esteem, you know. I know some of the kids, some of my ADHD boys back then, they were like, I'm going to ask my spirit guide what's on the math test, you know, and they did, but it wasn't so much for that, but it's more about trusting their perceptions, even if they're wrong. Even if initially they go to say something and it doesn't prove correct, doesn't mean they have to silence themselves for the next. And I say this to the adults too. You may not know, but the next thing you say may be true. But if you silence yourself, if you judge yourself, and so it's teaching them to trust these abilities more than, and so through games and learning the different talents that they have, it breeds that without going, you must trust what you know, but I think, and I hope that answers your question in a way. I mean, there's lots of games and things that you can make up and do with them. You don't have to follow mine, but I think that kids do it all the time. And they're, it's natural for them. I mean, how many kids know what their pet is feeling? But to validate it for them, to help them do that. I mean, I had a kid who was 4 years old, and his older brother was autistic. And he was the one in the family. He was the one that knew because his brother couldn't talk. He was on that spectrum. And he knew exactly what his brother needed or wanted, simply because he picked it up. They've done tests on blind children and found that they can perceive even better than sighted children. So this is, talking about kids even with disabilities, as we call them. Their intuitive talents are not limited by that. but we're not using them. So in answer to your question, let the kids guide you. Let them explore. Listen. The main thing is listen. You don't have to listen and go, oh, anything my child says is absolutely intuitive and absolutely right. Use your gut feeling. If they're making it up, you'll know it. I think that's important. And the other thing I want to say about that is a lot of very highly intuitive children, I think Ellen can validate this too, is that intuitively they're old souls. So they're like 40-year-old people, and you're talking to them as if they're your peer. But then they do something really goofy by being a little kid. And it's hard for the parent to put that together. So it's good to kind of be a little wise about that, because it's really difficult sometimes, because you're talking to this kid, and I see it all the time. I'm in a grocery store and I see these little infants, and you can tell by their faces and their eyes are going, I don't know what to do in here. Why can't I just get out of this shopping cart and go walk? I mean, it's frustrating for them and for all of us, but I think it's important to listen to them, but not to praise every single thing they say and say, wow, that kid's so intuitive.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow.
I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah.
It does. Can I kind of ask another kind of question surrounding it? And that is, do these kids, because I realize, right, we're amongst friends here, and it's something that we're all open and willing to kind of acknowledge, but I know there's a lot of people out there that, for example, don't believe it, don't, think it is anything to be validated, I guess, as you have said,
That's how I
Litany.
grew up.
But do the kids end up like, when these kids get, for example, like bullied for these kinds of things? I see, feel, experience, believe that is just such a negative for the people that have the abilities as well as the children, because there's an expected, explanation, right, for the behavior and, the detailed. And I also find that when kids do get bullied and that does get reported, right, a lot of the focus then ends up on the kid that was bullied, whereas the kids that are doing it, or the parents of the kids that are doing it, are not like connected in such a way to their child to be so open to that. So do you have any, I guess, recommendations for handling that avenue?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I feel that, even the kids that are bullies, they were sensitive kids, and they're sensitive kids in there too. And there's no, I don't want to say training, because we don't want to do sensitivity training, because again, that's very mentally focused. But that kind of feeling, that kind of, if kids, I'll give you an example. I put it in my book, honestly. First of all, sensitivity is not a weakness, and that's something that's never told to sensitive kids or to any kid. Sensitivity is a great strength, because you can sense and see what's going on and what's coming and be prepared. But and it connects you. But I asked a group of kids, I think this was after Columbine, actually, because that's how far back it went. And now there's so many school shootings. And I said, what would happen if kids develop their intuitive abilities, their psychic abilities? Would there be less kids killing kids, or would it not matter? I mean, I didn't try and feed them. And their answer was very interesting, so interesting to me that I put it in my book, that they said if they developed their abilities, if these abilities were developed or acknowledged, they wouldn't kill other kids because they'd feel them. And I think that's the big problem. And not that everybody has to be in touch with their intuition. I mean, I'm not big on, personally, groupies in the psychic field, that everything's, intuitive and whatever. And I'm not big on people that just sit there and go, this doesn't exist. But I feel that and one of the reasons how I wrote my books was because I wanted it to be practical. I wanted them to be practical. I wanted people to understand. And there are people that, regardless of who they are going to have strong defenses and not be open to it. And they're probably the most sensitive because they built those defenses. But for the kids that are bullied and for the bullies, I think there should be another way, using intuition as a tool for them to feel each other and to be able to communicate with each other, because isn't that part of the problem in our entire social world right now, where people talk at each other and everybody's living in their own little hut? And yet I think, I read for people all over the world, and the biggest question right now, which I never had before, was, what's my purpose?
Mhm.
Instead of saying, wow, I'm really scared or whatever. But I think, personally, I know that whole bully thing. I mean, I grew up with bullies in my family and people in my life. And I think, and now it's become kind of a norm, but I think that having that knowledge of your own intuitive talents for kids to build their self-esteem and know and feel that bully and feel those other things, they're not going to be so intimidated. They're not going to sit there sniveling and being scared. As I said, a lot of kids that grow up in really economically impoverished neighborhoods, they use their intuitive talents quite naturally just to survive. And I think that we do a great disservice to our children when we do all the work for them, all the emotional work for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem, the helicopter problem, where it's not like they have to go out there and get punched, but maybe there's another way of teaching and teaching and sharing with your children rather than being out there. I know I started and help run now a nonprofit that feeds and clothes people. And it's so interesting to me still, because I do the website and because we're just grassroots, that these are teenage kids. I mean, they're not little kids. And it's their mothers that get on the website that ask for community service or ask if there's something they can do because they need credits or something. It's never the kids. And so I think, in answer to your question, I think we're looking at it, as you said, and seem to know, kind of the wrong way with this whole bullying. Not to say what they're doing is wrong to help remedy it. Of course it's right. But I think there's an added component for both kids, because the bully kids are kids that, are who knows what their background is. I mean, they may be coming from bullies and that's what they learned. It's not inherent. Kids are not that way. They're not born that way. They're born connected, regardless of what they look like, gender, sex, economic, whatever. Color doesn't matter to kids. But then around age 3 or 4, we start learning. And then that becomes embedded in our learning and in our schools and in our, obviously in our communities and certainly in our world right now, which there's I think a great need for learning something that's going to connect us, not in talk, but in behavior.
Whitney, can I add a little bit to what you're saying? Because I love what you're saying, because we went through this with our son, the whole bullying thing. And he was going to school because of his heightened abilities. And he was talking about topics that others couldn't understand. Like he would go to school and say, Mom, he'd come home and tell me, Mom, I was trying to tell the kids at school that we're multidimensional beings, and that, and I was like, sweetie, you can't go to school talking like that, because not everybody's going to understand. So the other kids are like, okay, this child is a little bit different and not understanding. He was just coming from the fact that he's talking what is real to him, but he got bullied a lot. And that was our drive for like starting this group and starting the website, because it goes back to trying to normalize and educate people about the fact that we all have intuition. We're all intuitively connected. Some have it in a little different way, a little heightened way. and that we need to, I think the more we can get people to start open their thinking about it, talking about it, like I love your Medium at Large series, Litany, where people are starting to have these conversations, then we can start getting people to understand. I agree. I think that's beautiful what you said, that if these kids were allowed to stay connected to their abilities and stay open to it, they would interact with each other differently. And not just the kids, even the parents, the adults, you start interacting and talking differently and teaching our kids differently, that it's okay and it's not weird or anything. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there are a lot of parents now that are open and that are searching, for ways in which to help their children. But it's not like they have to find me or you, but they have to find themselves, actually, because they're psychic children, they're intuitive children themselves. And I think that it's important. This is a time of great change, and it's great change for a reason, not just because of COVID. And it's a time, that's why people are asking. And it's a time for people to not go inside and nothing against meditation, but I like to teach living meditation, where people go out there and have to use their abilities and listen in a different way, not after the fact, but during the fact. And it's just really important, because if the kids are not nurtured in this way, obviously we're going to have a whole generation of drug addled, which we already have. One of the reasons I did the film, or want to do the film, is I want to show how we are when we come here and where we go and what's happening with adults. Because if our mental abilities were all that we should rely on, why are so many people unhappy? Why are so many people taking drugs? Why are so many people over exercising? Why are so many people overeating? Why are so many people miserable? And so it's not like the holy grail, it's the missing link. That's all. I mean, it's not like I have the secret. It's like it's something that we don't want to. I remember it was funny because I'm in New York, but I go to LA to pitch some of my projects. And I went to this film company guy, a development guy, and I was telling him about my projects. And the person with me said, "Why don't you tell him what else you do?" And I'm like, I'm still programmed, like, I don't talk about it, because people are either going to make fun of me or else they're going to want everything from me. And I just went, "Oh, okay, well, I'm a psychic." And he goes, "Oh, I'm an astrologer." And I went, "Wow, times have changed." It was a relief. But people don't have to be professionals. A lot of these kids are going to grow up to be a professional psychic. I never planned on it. But they can these kids need to use their abilities to have better lives.
Yeah, I love that, because I agree so much. It's like you said, it's the missing link, because you just use these abilities in whatever field or profession, whatever you're called to do, and use them to help support that.
Yeah, to support you. And that, it's like osmosis, because we're all connected. When you're talking from you, or you're doing something from you, other people tend to kind of be drawn to that without talking. Even the bullies, even you find a way to communicate without going, "Okay, let's all sit in a circle and we'll all talk about our feelings." That works if you want to break some ground, but the bottom line is, how do we go deeper now? Because I think most people want to do that, and I think it's great, because we have all been waiting for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I love the fact that, like we were talking, Litany, that the way you design your books with these exercises, and the one for kids, it's for the family, because we have to start helping the parents to understand their intuitive connection, for those who don't, so that they really have it and how to work with it. And the more that the parents understand it, the more we can help the children, and the more the educators and the counselors and all of the other professionals. That's why we put a website together with that information on there, to try and start getting people to have a resource to see, and just kind of open their thinking that, this is something that we need to look at and differently in order to help our children. But we got to start changing and opening the adults' minds to help the kids.
Years ago, they almost accepted me to teach a class to teachers they would get credits. They'd be accredited to teach talking about maintaining inner balance in the classroom. They would get credits for that in New York State. And I had like a 10-week course, but somehow, things changed. So I haven't tried to pursue that in any way, but I think it's important because so many really good teachers, really good therapists, really good doctors, professionals, and people that even, are in jobs where they have to really use their hands and have that, know where the pipe goes and all that. They use their abilities too. And there are a lot of adults who love children who may not have children, maybe single parents, maybe foster parents, it may have adopted kids. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's what you're doing in your life, and and what you're passing down to young people. And honestly, teachers right now, I know they're really stressed and they have all these academic things that they have to do. And I think those really talented teachers are really kind of leaving the profession.
Mhm.
Because it's too difficult to do that. I remember as a kid in my first year in college, there was a teacher from Eastern Europe, and he taught very conceptually. Now, I didn't know I was a clairvoyant, and clairvoyants are conceptual, but I really loved it because he was teaching what it's like, for the Greek mind, and the culture. So you got to really kind of understand the overview to learn the specifics, which is the way kids learn, by the way. They learn visually, they learn conceptually. And so I remember saying, I don't think I'm gonna do very well in this class, but I really like it. And he taught, I think, 2 semesters, and they kicked him out because he didn't teach that kind of multiple choice way. And kids were failing because that's how American kids are.
Mhm.
It's the Mickey D approach to life. That's how we all are. We've learned that.
Wow. Well, this is, look, Litany, can you talk a little bit about, because I know you've had different projects, we touched on like the Medium at Large series and your trailer about the children among us. Can you talk about some of these other projects that you're working on to, help open people's thinkings to intuitive abilities and with kids and just in general?
Yeah, well, obviously I give lectures and talks, and certainly the Medium at Large is something that I just went out on the street and just talked to people and let them talk about an experience so that people can see that we all have these experiences, and they're not huge ahas, but they're also exciting. And eventually want to do a show called The Psychic Matrix, which is being able to have that interaction with people, but also explain questions people have about intuition, and do an exercise with people and just talk about funny things, because my blog is just things that happen to me. They're just funny to me. But I have a novel that I have out there that's called goddess.com, and it kind of laughs at everybody, but it also has a message. All my stuff has messages. Some of my work, I'm about to pitch a TV series about, and it has intuitive students and a teacher, and what they go through and also what they do. And I'm working on a graphic novel now with an illustrator, and it's about 2 different cultures, but one's modern and one is past. And I don't, and kind of the characters and how they interact, and only this one person sees some of the past characters. So it's not like, well, these are new age, or these are, and this is my life. I mean, I like to write stories. And so that's some of the things that, I'm working on presently. And I'd like to do, I think, a podcast.
Oh, that's great. That would be
Something I'm
great.
thinking about. I did one long ago called Intuitive Nation, and I'm rethinking that. So because this is the time for change, so I'm seeing what I really want to do. If I want to do a YouTube matrix thing, or I want to do a podcast, or both, or none.
Well, what about the children among us? I shared that little trailer in the group, and that's going to be turning into a bigger documentary.
The trailer is just a little piece of a 30-minute film that I made on a shoestring that I kind of show and give a lecture about kids. And it has music. I mean, can't charge for it because it has all contemporary music that I'm not paying royalties for. But it shows people what happens if we don't nurture these abilities in our kids, in ourselves, and what happens not only to their lives, but to the world. And so it's kind of an overview of the documentary that I'd like to make with a really bona fide producer and director, because I think it's important. This was just done on a shoestring and I used it as a lecture. So on my website is the trailer for Children Among Us. So it gives a little taste of what's in that film and what I'd like to do.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really good. All of it's good, helpful. We keep putting it out there. And you, like I said, pioneer, you started this back in the 90s. So it's really,
It would be like this.
And now it's needed. A lot of people, so many people are wanting and needing and to have this information. A question I'd like to ask is, how, for you, do you have an age, like how young you would start working with kids to stay? I think as soon as you can, you could, start keeping them connected. What would you say and suggest on working with kids and keeping them connected to their abilities?
Well, I think, certainly you have to be able to communicate with them, although you can notice different things in different children. Some when I read for people, they send me photographs of their kids, and a lot of times I'll go, oh, this kid's really sensitive, or this kid has strong defenses, or whatever. But I think that as soon as the children are able to talk and relate, you want to listen to them. You want to reinforce their impressions. If they're having nightmares, you want to help them to kind of, do something within their own power to get rid of whatever that's scaring them. There's a lot that parents can do or people can do using their own abilities to really reinforce their children and listen to them. If the kid says, I saw grandpa, and you feel like, yeah, not really, it's okay. You don't have to go, yeah, not really. But if you did see grandpa, you want to be able to say, and what did he look like? And where did he go? And, not to be afraid, because if you're afraid, then your kid's going to be afraid of their abilities. So I think that's the big thing. If you're pushing them down, I remember being in a car and there was a woman in the car and her little girl was talking to her imaginary playmate, and her mother just said, cut that out. Just stop it. There's nobody there. That kid's not gonna, that child is not that you say, oh, what did your playmate say to you? But I think it's important to just, let the kids guide you. Because they just came from there. They're still in touch with their souls. They're really in touch with their abilities. They just need to know how to use them here.
That's wonderful advice. And I absolutely agree. That's just to hold space for them and let them.
Yeah, let them develop, let them explore. You might learn something where they say the child is the father of man or out of the mouth of babes. It doesn't mean that they know everything or they have it together, but you certainly, if you've been squelched, the last thing you want to do is squelch a kid, but you also don't want to revere every single thing they say either. They're people and they're learning.
Right.
We're all in this learning together. Sorry.
Or pushing them out there to, if they have abilities, you also don't want to go to the other extreme of pushing them out there and doing readings for people. You need to let them be kids and let them come to it when they're meant to.
That's so, you're so right. That's so true. Let them come to it when they're meant to, because a lot of kids will just use their abilities in their lives to have better lives and to better the people in their lives. And that's fine. Not everybody's going to be out there performing. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was musically inclined, and every time, a relative would come, my parents would want me to play music, and I was like, I hated it. I cried. I never did music again. Not that I don't love music, but I never did that again, because that's not what you want to do with an intuitive kid. You want to help them to use their abilities to help themselves and help others, not to be out there as this. Again, it makes you an oddball.
Yeah.
In a world where everybody has to fit in. I say celebrate the difference. Be the round peg with all the square holes, but celebrate the difference. As you asked about, sensitive kids, celebrate the difference, but you can't do that in a mental way, because then you have to keep thinking it.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes an ego.
Yeah. Well, Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Litany, what would you say is the, like you said, just holding space for your kids? What would be the, I guess, the one or two pieces of advice that you would give to parents that you think parents or even like others that are listening, school counselors, educators, folks that you've worked with over time that could help them to really understand how they need to support or hold space or be open for these children?
I think it's important to listen to them, but to validate what they're saying by your gut feeling, of feeling it, because that's where kids live. They live in their gut, so they'll relate to you. But the other thing is, if you're listening to what you know, you're giving the kids space just naturally. You're not there going, oh, please tell us more. You're naturally giving the child space, the child, will keep talking or not talking and letting that child be, but validating with your gut, which a lot of, we don't do. We override it with what we think or what we should do, or reading all the books about it, or, and I think the main thing adults want to do is get back to that part of themselves, because that's where we have perspective and wisdom and intuition, along with our physical knowledge around here. This is our center. This is where our bodies and souls talk to us and feel. It gives us our emotional boundaries. It also gives us information, because it gets our brain free to be part of the unit so we can get information. How many of us do our best work when we're doing, because our brain's out of the way, or we get impressions when we wake up or when we're sleeping in our dreams because our brains are out of the way. So we want our brains to work as a functioning part of the unit, not the whole unit, not be the whole unit. So I think it's simple. You don't have to try so hard, parents or people, because it's natural. You try hard, you close off. All you have to do is listen to yourself, because that will build your knowing and get you in touch with your abilities. So you will naturally be able to help children around you and listen to them, because maybe they'll listen to you.
That's wonderful. Great advice.
Yeah, that's where kids
Great
connect.
advice.
They connect in the solar plexus. They don't connect mentally. You could talk to a kid until you turn blue. You can talk to people until you turn blue, and they'll get it, and then they'll just go do it again. But if you're saying something, and try it with your child or try it with a pet, say no to them from your head and then say no to them from your gut, and see the difference in the response.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
this is something I teach people all the time. This is where we have both parts of ourselves, so we can feel that unity in ourselves very naturally. And your gut will tell you how far to come out to your child. So if you're feeling like, oh, he's really hurt and he's crying, but there's that voice inside you that said he's going to be okay, that's your voice that you're not listening to. And you're putting his voice and his needs bigger than yours. So I think it's important to be able to be that person. If you want to really help your child, be your own role model.
I like that.
In a real way. And when people talk from that place, people listen. Think of the people that you revere. They're not the people that are just talking from their heads, or you could say they're talking from their hearts, but they're not even just talking from their hearts. They're talking from both parts of themselves, which is the head and heart, your body and your soul.
Wow. That's beautiful. And that's absolutely beautiful. I love that. And for everybody out there, and you even talk about that in your book about the body and the soul communicating together to make that total person.
Right. Because the soul can see the bigger picture of a person or situation or moment, and the body lives in the moment. So it's like, I always liken it to driving a car. Do you just look over the hood of the car, or do you just look down the road? If you just look down the road, you might hit the person who's walking in front of you. And if you're just looking in front of you, you can get past the stop sign, but you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
We need both worlds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So Litany, because Litany does have a website, litanyburns.com. Okay. And so are you still doing classes or sessions with children or families? Are you still doing that type of work right now?
Right now I'm doing readings and obviously writing, and as soon as I get it together with Zoom, I'll probably start doing classes again, or lectures. And anybody that wants me to give a lecture or a class, they can get in touch with me, or anybody that's interested in, the documentary, not just as an interested person, but someone who can help move it along. They can always get in touch with me too.
Great. And we hope
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry, Ellen.
Oh, sure. Please, Kim. Go ahead.
Litany, do you ever provide like a lecture? I know you said that teachers want the continuing education units or whatever, but have you ever gone to like a school for the parents and the teachers to talk to the group?
Yeah.
But have you, I guess, is the
I have talked to groups. Yes, I have given, but I'd love to be going in there and doing some work with teachers and parents in groups. I'd rather, honestly, when I'm doing things like that, I like to have a lot of people, because sometimes we'll do experiential things, and if you just have like 5 people and they all know each other, it becomes a little difficult for my work, for what I want to have happen. So I like to have big groups with people interacting with strangers who are no longer strangers with them after they interact with them. But yeah, I mean, I have a whole series of lectures that I give and have given on my website. But yeah, I've been in schools, I've done private schools, not so much public schools, because I don't know, there's that stigma, I guess, but I have gone into schools and given a class or lectured or showed my film to teachers. In fact, I went to a community college. This is just a funny story. I went to a community college, and the kids, it was, I think, Women's Day or month. And so this teacher invited me, and I was showing my film and giving a lecture, and the kids, to get credit, had to attend. So they were not, there were kids from business school and kids from English classes, not really into me. And so I was up there, and as we were getting ready, and there was one guy, and he obviously, I felt, was in a business class, and he was mocking me, and he was mocking this, pretty out loud, having fun and stuff. And I didn't say anything. And then I just showed my film, and when the film was over and I had to talk, I thought, oh man, this is not going to be fun. Somebody said something, and he told them, be quiet, this is really important. So you never know. There are a lot of people that, find out what I do, and they're like, oh, I don't believe in this. And they're like, what did you say? So people are different. I usually stay away from the people that go, oh yes, I've taken 1 million classes and I'm a high intuitive and I do Reiki and whatever. I usually go, that's great. But I like to talk to the people that are nuts and bolts people that go, well, oh, well, that's interesting, or whatever, people. So there's those extremes where I don't like to talk to the people that are so closed off making fun of me, nor talking to the people that think that they know everything. I like to just stay in the middle, the middle lane, so to speak, and talk to people that just are open, that might be interested. And it's always those people who are incredibly talented go, I don't have any intuitive ability, but I go, are you kidding me? Because no one's shown that to them. So it's a great breakthrough. So yes, I love doing that. And I love to see the faces of people when they're partnering up and using their abilities for whatever I'm teaching, and see their eyes light up and go, whoa, I couldn't believe that. Because they get to be in touch with their abilities, not me, it's them. And I even let them read me. I let them read me as a group, which is very scary, but also very good.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. I know we're coming to the end. We could talk to you all afternoon, but it's been very interesting. And I'm glad that you talked about the fact, because you on your website, and you've been doing this for years. And, I hope the people on replay, and if there's any educators out there that want to reach out to you directly or through us, that's our whole point with this Facebook group and the website, is to help provide experts and information that, you know, people can have access to and to reach out to, and to start, the more we as a whole start talking about this, normalizing it, knowing that there's information out there, and your information has been out since the late 90s, that it's available. People just don't know and don't have the access. And that's what we put your book on the resources
Thank you.
section on our Highly Intuitive Kids website. But it's just to give access and let people know this is not strange, it's not weird, it's been around, it's always been around, but there's actually books that support it. And your book, what drew me so much to your information, Litany, was all the beautiful exercises that's in it, that, like we talked about, families can do it together, and it will help the parent as well as the child. But schools, teachers, anybody can pick these up, look at them, and use this information, you know, to help themselves and help the kids they work with.
And thanks for what you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is important work. And I know it may have started with your son, but you're carrying it on. Your husband's going to be carrying it on, and it's important. So anything we can do, I'm happy to do.
Oh, great. Thank you. We'd love to have you back. Like I mentioned, as I guess, you know, on our blog, as a, you know, to come and do some workshops with us, come speak with us again. I think this is just such an important topic that we will keep the conversation going and have great experts like you to come and work with us. And
Happy to work with you. Thanks for having me.
thank you. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. And so once again, litanyburns.com. You can see more of our information there. And, you know, we just really appreciate you. And thank you very much for doing this with us today.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. Take care.
And you too.